Hi everybody, it's Mr. Gray here. Thank you again for sending your kids for another really great week of school. A few announcements to get us started. Number one, as a reminder, if you haven't turned in money for all the field trips this year, please send that in. Many of you have, thank you very much. It really helps fund those great experiences, and it really proves that we can keep doing things like that next year if everyone's giving. So if you have questions about that, you can always ask me, but $45 if you can send it in, that's really helpful. Checks can be made out to Santiago Hills. Next week, there's a few things happening. Number one, there's no school on Monday. Teachers are here working, I'll be here working, but students are not at school on Monday. On Wednesday next week, the 18th, is school picture day. So we are scheduled to have our pictures taken right after recess. You kind of plan on that. We don't have anything else happening in the morning. We might go outside and play with the buddies a little bit, or we might be inside. We just kind of have to see how it goes. So there might be a little playtime in the morning if you're planning on, what the students are wearing, but we'll try to take that into account when we have our little buddies. And then sometime right after recess, the kids will have pictures taken. So the only kind of playtime before pictures is maybe a little bit of buddies outside and then recess. You can kind of plan accordingly if you're thinking about what to wear, but that's school picture day on Wednesday. The last announcement I have is actually for the next week, but I wanted to give you a heads up. On Monday, October 23rd, we're doing our first mile run practice. So at the very end of the school year, or really a little before spring break, all the fifth graders in California take physical fitness testing. They have to do push-ups and curl-ups and flexibility. And there's one more thing they do is they get a mile run time. Now, everyone's in a different place. The mile run, some kids are super excited to get to run a mile, and other kids are dreading it. Our goal is always to make sure we're growing in all areas. So we just want all the kids to try their best and hopefully grow throughout the year. So we'll do a little bit of practice every couple of months, so only 3 times maybe before the actual mile run practice. We're gonna work up to that distance and also that amount of time. So the goal for that Monday, October 23rd, is the kids only have to try to jog for maybe like 6 to 8 minutes, and that way that's maybe halfway. That's half a mile if you're not really used to running a whole mile. So you're trying to just work our way up a little bit, and some kids will run the whole mile, and that's great too. But that'll be about all we do for that mile run practice that day. But we will be out on the grass, and so you can send students with kind of appropriate footwear and clothing for that. So we'll run a little bit, and then that will come up another couple months, but mile run practice will be Monday, October 23rd. One more quick announcement before we get on to what's happening academically next week. If you haven't signed up for PTA, it's a fantastic organization, and it really helps out the school. So if you can, please do that. And for those of you that did, thank you very much. In reading next week, we're going to continue reading realistic fiction stories. We are really trying to read intentionally. I talked about that last week. We are not simply reading for entertainment. All of your students are good readers. Now we are trying to read with kind of a specific focus. And the focus is going to be on reading, thinking I'm going to be writing about the story. Characters, themes, symbols, plot setting, making connections. I'm going to be writing about that. So as I'm reading, I'm thinking about those things, not just about what's happening in the plot. Some students really are very strong at writing summaries. I can tell you everything that happened in the story, and that's great, but I'm sure all your students could have done that in 3rd grade. So as fifth graders, we're trying to read a little bit more intentionally and analytically. So next week, we're gonna really focus on theme. We kind of introduced that this week. Some people are more familiar with that than others, but we're really trying to find the deeper meaning in a story. And sometimes it's hidden, and it's not always very obvious. I talked about this in class today, which is that it's not like a math problem where 2 times something equals 6 and there's one specific answer. 3 students might read the same book and they might say 3 different things for the theme, and they all might be right. So we're trying to find these like big ideas that the author is putting in the story, what we're going to learn out of the story. So we're talking about themes, we're talking about symbols, and we're also still growing the ideas we had before about characters. And now we're going to try to match these up. So we're using these ideas that I'm growing to kind of generate, like, you can think of it as like a bigger web of ideas where what's happening between the characters might connect to the theme. Different parts of the story might connect to the theme. Symbols from the story might connect to the theme. Themes might be similar across books or across authors or across a series. And so we're starting to try to make those connections. And then the week after, we'll have a little theme assessment where the kids will read a story they haven't read and try to identify a theme. And so we're just doing all that practice work to get ready for that assessment. That's what's happening in reading this week. I'm also continuing to read out loud The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. It's a fantastic story. We're doing a little bit of work where we're watching how Edward is feeling. He also changes throughout the story. He gets to be with different people, and they kind of their personality rubs off on him and he rubs off on them. So we're kind of tracking that throughout the story. There's more happening in writing next week, but first, your students had some homework this week, which is to take the published piece that they turned in and read it out loud to a parent or a trusted adult at home, and you got to see the compliments that kids left for them. So if you haven't done that, ask your students to show it to you, read the work that they've done. They've been working hard for a while. We're moving on next week to our second personal narrative, and the kids are trying to raise our level a little bit from that. So we're going to focus on a few things. We're going to talk about trying to include that deeper meaning, which was absent on some of the first ones. You know, that's a difficult skill we're trying to add in. We might use flashbacks or flash forwards or other structures to kind of help us include the deeper meaning. And we're also trying to choose the stories specifically that have a big problem or conflict or tension that maybe I can infuse a deeper meaning into. So next week, what we're going to do is we're going to try to stretch out the tension in the story. So of those moments where they feel a lot of tension, we're going to really try to stretch those out so the reader also gets to feel that tension. We're also going to talk about figurative language and making choices about when to use figurative language. So we try to emphasize feelings that come out of certain actions. And then also, we're going to try to make sure every character plays a role in the story. So we're going to choose characters specifically and make them talk in specific ways so that they're not just an outside character, they're actually playing a specific role in the story. In math, we're getting toward the end of our current little unit before we take a couple little detours. So we're working on prime factorization and prime power factorization. We're talking about different models for multiplication, and we're talking about patterns using ordered pairs. And then we'll take a quiz next week, and then we'll be on to a couple other things before we get to more of like a project or possibly even the next unit. In social studies, we're continuing to look at both primary and secondary source documents related to why King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella decided to sponsor Christopher Columbus on his voyage across the Atlantic. So we are generating some ideas based on those documents about why they might have done that. And so currently we're talking about maybe there's a money element, whether that's supplies for the country or just riches. There's also this element of pride or power. So as we get to the documents, it will become more clear and the kids will be generating more evidence and a better idea. But currently we have this like kind of foggy picture of some reasons why that might be happening, but we're getting through some documents and collecting some evidence before we end up writing an essay using all this work that we've done. In science, the kids are going to be reading an article about different states of matter, and then, of course, they're going to go to science lab with Mrs. DeMarco. For vocab next week, they're doing spelling words, so we'll get the spelling words on Tuesday because there's no school on Monday, and then they'll have a quiz on Friday. They're all about heterographs, which are words that are the same word, but they have like completely different meanings. So for instance, an attribute is different than to attribute. So they sound different, they are different words, but they are actually spelled the same. They can get a little confusing. I'm going to try to do a little bit of mixing, but we're going to kind of talk about both of those words and how they work. And then they'll have a spelling test on Friday. That will be our 6 weeks of vocabulary, grammar, and spelling. And then we'll take kind of a more final test using, like, talking about all of those things the week after, but you'll hear about that a little more next week. Finally, our leadership habit this week is to have balance in your life. So trying to work out your mind and your body and your soul, your emotional health, and trying to have as much balance as possible is better. And we're studying a real life hero, John Urschel, who was both a NFL lineman, a very big guy, and also had multiple very high-level math degrees. So he has a book about trying to balance the life of someone who has a PhD in mathematics and also be an NFL football player. So it's really interesting. We're going to read a little bit about him and kind of talk about different ways we can, put balance into our life, be willing to take risks, and try new things, things like that. So it'll be a fun conversation. Hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.